interpreter directly. So whenever you want to give some instructions are nothing but commands, right? So whenever you want to command your interpreter, you need to use an environment which is provided by IDE. Okay, this IDE means Integrated Development Environment. So whenever you want to perform some operations or whenever you want to give some commands or instructions to your interpreter, you can directly give instructions to your interpreter using this IDE. Okay, how to give instructions from this IDE we'll discuss now. This is a integrated development environment and it is given by the officials of Python from the official site python.org. See, if you go to this official site python.org. Okay, so when you go through this python.org official site, there you'll find different tabs over here, right? Like documentation, downloads, community, success stories, etc., etc., right? From these downloads, you can directly download the Python interpreter from this. When you click on this download Python, the latest version is 3.8.5 and this is a current version which is available in your Python programming language. When you go to that official site, from this button, you can download the Python interpreter on your system. Okay, so I'm using a Python 3.7 version. I'm just opening that here. When you see, once you are done with that downloading and installation steps, you'll go to start menu and then search for IDLE. Okay, you'll find this IDLE Python 3.7 is my older version and the latest version is 3.8. Once you're done with that installation, you can see this icon of your application from your start menu. Okay, then just click on that. Open that application. Just it will take some time. And you can see that a Python prompt on that shell window. Okay, so when you load this IDLE, you'll find this on the screen. So you can see here, right? This is Python shell. Okay, why it is Python shell? And whenever you want to instruct your interpreter, you need to write your command here. Okay, after this three greater than symbols, you need to write your instructions or your commands here. Okay, so how to give instructions from this statement? Okay, now I'm writing some basic operations here. So can you see it is performing that operation, that when I'm writing some statement here. When I hit on enter, you'll get that output, that corresponding command output on the screen. So whenever you're writing statements after this symbol, after this prompt, is nothing but you are directly instructing your interpreter to perform this operation. Once your interpreter executes that, immediately it will give you an output on the screen. The similar way for this. See what I'm doing here, I'm concatenating two strings, nothing but I'm joining two strings. So when you hit on enter, it will give you an output immediate to that. This is known as interactive. Okay, you can call it as interactive mode. Okay, it is nothing but directly interacting with your interpreter. So most of the members will call it as interactive programming language. Clear? This is the reason we're calling it as interactive programming language. And I have given the statement that this code is executed by interpreter, right? So you can call it as interpreted programming language. Okay, so what is the difference between this interpreter and compiler? So if you go with C language, If you go with C language, whatever the code you have written in C language is executed by compiler, right? The same way, if I write the code in Python programming language, it is executed by interpreter. Now I just want to give you what is the difference between this interpreter and compiler. Okay, so let me write the code in C language. Let us suppose this is my code written in C language. I hope most of the members are familiar with C language. Okay, so let us suppose in this C programming language, I have written some five to six lines of code. I'm mentioning the line with number. Okay, you just don't bother about the code. Whatever I'm writing, I'm giving just dashes here. This is my C program. Okay, so I saved this program. Okay, I saved this program with demo.c. Okay, after saving this, I have compiled the code and then I have run the code. Then I'll get output on the screen, right? So when I get this output on the screen, is anybody? When I'll get that output on the screen, yes, I want responses from you guys. So I have written some lines of code. Okay, so when I'll get that output after running that code, I hope you are familiar with C language, right? Anybody from non-technical background from the participants list? Yes, I'm asking you a question. I need response. No response. You guys want me to continue like this without expecting any response from you? Yes, are you listening to me? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, thank you, Krishna. Why don't you responding to my question? Like I'm asking a question, right? You just tell me whether you are from technical background or non-technical background. Just put a message in the chat window. Non-technical Krishna, technical Swaminathan. What about you? Let it be. Okay. So when you write, if you write program in any programming language, okay. So once that code is compiled, when you run that code, if there are no errors or nothing but if you're not making any syntactical mistakes, then only you'll get output, right? If you are making any syntactical mistakes, that syntactical mistakes may be compile time errors or they might be some runtime errors. If your code is not giving any errors, then only you'll get output, right? The similar way, let us suppose if I'm making some mistakes, okay? Let us suppose here I have written some syntactical mistake and here I have written some syntactical mistakes. That is nothing but I made two mistakes in my code. Okay, so that error might be compile time or runtime. Okay, let us consider it as compile time error. Okay, so in my code I made two compile time errors. Like you can say that you made two mistakes. Okay, so when you compile that code, all the two errors are displayed on the screen or only one. Okay, if you go with this C language, whatever the errors you have made, all the errors will be displayed on the screen. Okay, is nothing but your entire code, whatever the code you are writing, your entire code will be compiled at a time. Okay, so if you take compiler, whatever the code you are writing in your programming language, entire code will be compiled at a time. This is nothing but batch wise execution. Okay, it is known as batch wise execution. Okay, so if you take Python, it is executed by interpreter. So how this compiler is differentiating from interpreter is important to understand. So if you take this compiler, it is executing your code at a time, so you can call it as batch wise. Whereas come to interpreter, interpreter executes line by line. Okay, first control goes to the first line. If this line is executed perfectly, then control goes to the second line. Now here I'm making mistake at second line. Okay, when control goes to second line, this interpreter understands that user is making some mistake over there. Then program stops execution at that particular line itself. Control will not go forward to the next line. This is known as line by line execution. Okay, so you just compare this interpreter with compiler. In compiler, code will be executed at a time. So you can call it as batch wise execution. Whereas come to interpreter, it executes line by line. So when you are making mistake at second line, the control will not go forward to the third line. When you rectify this line number 2, or else when you make the syntax correct, then only control go forward with the next line. So, and third line, there are no errors. So it goes to fourth line. Again, at fourth line, I'm making some mistake. You need to rectify this error. Else, your program execution stops at the fourth line. Then only control go forward with fifth and end of the program. This is the difference between compiler and interpreter. Line by line execution take place in interpreter, and batch wise execution will take place in compiler. Okay, this is the difference between compiler and interpreter. And your Python supports interpreter. So you can call it as interpreted programming language. Okay, so and the next one is, it is open source. What do you mean by open source? Okay, I already given that official site, right? Python.org. If you go to that official site, see here you'll find softwares required for that Python programming language. And here you'll find a documentation related to the topics which are available in your Python. And you'll find some communities. Okay, let us suppose you build a logic which is not there in your Python official documentations, or if you go with language specific things there that is not developed, you can serve your logic to this big community. Okay, and you can see here Python is open, right? You can contribute your logics also. Okay, that is the main advantage here. And whatever you want regarding this Python programming, you can just go to this python.org official site. There you'll find everything related to your Python. So you can call it as downloading, softwares and documentation. Everything is available for free of cost to everyone. So you can call it as open source. Okay, this is another reason. And Python is platform independent. What do you mean by platform independent? Okay, so let us suppose if you take C language. Okay, see, in this C language, I have written code using Windows operating system. Let us suppose I build an application using C language on Windows. Okay, so you cannot use the same logic to run on Linux. You need to make some changes in your code, whichever you comfortable with Windows. You need to make some changes to run the code on Linux or other operating systems. Okay, so if you take Python, Python is not at all based on any OS. If you take any OS, let it be, if I have written logic on Windows, you can execute the same logic on Linux, Mac, Ubuntu, or any other OS. This Python compatible with all the all the OS. Sorry, not programming languages. It is compatible with all the OS. So you can call it as platform independent. Okay, and the next one is Python is object oriented programming language. Okay, in the previous session I have given that Python is object oriented programming language. Why we are calling it as object oriented? Everything is represented in terms of classes and objects. I have given this statement yesterday, right? So what do you mean by this class and objects? Okay, so if you take this is Jupyter notebook, don't worry about the environment, or else I'll go with this shell. Okay, so we already use this, right? So I'm writing some variable here. Okay, so if you compare this with other programming languages, whenever you want to create a variable, okay, whenever you want to create a variable, first you need to mention the data type and then a variable name. If you want to assign some value, you'll assign some value to that variable using this assignment operator. At the end, you'll end that statement by placing semicolon, right? This is how you'll create a variable in other programming languages. Okay, so this type of variable creation is known as dynamic typing. Sorry, static. Okay, static typing. Why we are calling it as static typing? Because before variable name, you are using data type. Based on this data type only, you are giving values to that variable. Okay, see, if you are writing data type as integer, if you are trying to store a character, the performance will be different, right? Okay, so that is the main reason we are calling it as static. Okay, why? Because based on data type, we are deciding the values. So whereas come to Python, whenever you want to create a variable, you no need to mention any data type. Okay, so in Python programming language, variable creation takes place like this. Variable name equals to and directly assign value. Okay, how the data type of this variable will be decided based on the value what you are assigning to the variable. The type of that variable will be decided. Okay, this is the difference between static typing and this is known as dynamic typing. Okay, so Python is dynamically typed programming language. Okay, so you just understand these two things. Whenever you are writing a data type before the variable name, it is known as static typing. If you are not writing any variable, any data type for the variable name beforehand, then you can call it as dynamically typed. Now, if you observe here, this is how we'll create a simple variable in Python. So now you can understand here, x is a variable name, right? And this 10 is value to that variable. Okay, so now based on this value, now 10 is of type if any number does not hold any decimal point, you can call it as integer. Okay, so now value which is assigned to that variable x is integer. So the type of this x will be integer. Okay. In Python, this integer is not a simple data type. It is a class. Okay. So whenever you are creating a variable, a simple variable creation comes under this class, and this x is technically known as reference. Not a simple variable, it is a reference. It is a reference to the object 10. Here 10 is an object. Okay, just remember these things. Here integer is a class. For this class, I am creating an object 10, and this 10 is referred by x. This is the actual meaning of variable creation in Python. Okay, just try to understand all this terminology. Okay, now hit on enter. Your x is created now. If you want to check the data type of that variable x, you can use the function type. When I write type of x, when you hit on enter, can you see that it is giving class int? What does it mean? The type of x is a reference object for integer class object. Okay, simple variable creation is also involved with the topic object and classes. So you can call it as object oriented programming language. Okay, and the most prestigious advantage is it is dynamically typed. Okay, and you already know it is a beginner's language. Okay, this is the definition of your Python programming language. Why we are calling it as beginners? Everyone can learn this programming language. Easy to learn, easy to understand, easy to remember and implement. Okay, so this is the reason why we are calling it as beginner's language. And this is the definition of your Python programming language. Okay, so Python is high level programming language, and it is interactive and interpreted programming language, and it is open source and platform independent, and it is object oriented programming language, and it is dynamically typed, and it is a beginner's language. Clear? This is the definition of your Python programming language. I hope it is clear for everyone. Yes, thank you. Clear, right? Okay. So, in the if you go to the first page of this document, you'll find different applications of Python programming language where we can use this Python programming language. I have given some different list of applications. Okay, so here I have given environments where you can run your Python logic. So if you go with this, you'll be having lots of environments where you can write your Python code. So if you want to go with a web development side, okay, I suggest you to go with some different IDEs like PyCharm, okay, or else you can go with Spider or Atom. So if you want to go with a data science or machine learning or deep learning or AI related applications, then I suggest you to go with Jupyter Notebook. Okay, so in these sessions, we will be using this Jupyter notebook. Okay, and this Jupyter notebook is very much comfortable compared with other IDEs. Okay, I'll show you how this Jupyter notebook will work. So, what's the difference between both? You're talking about PyCharm and Jupyter? Yes. Okay. Let me show you one example. Actually, I have a PyCharm in my system, but it will take long time to load. I'll show you with this IDLE. Okay. So if you take this IDLE, uh, whenever you're writing some code here, okay. So whenever you're writing some code here you can execute line by line. When you want to write program, okay, you need to go to file or click on new file. Okay, this window will be open on the screen. Okay, so once this window is opened on the screen, you need to start writing your code. Let us suppose I want to print hello everyone. Okay, I want to print hello everyone on the screen. Along with this, I want to write some like, or else I will go with some statements like I'll create some variables and I'll perform some operations like simple calculations like addition and subtraction on these variables. Okay, now you need to save this file. Always a Python files extension will be .py. Okay, now save this file. I'll go to some location. Okay, so here I'm storing this file with the name I have already have demo1 2. I'm saving it as demo3. Now can you see your file is saved with .py extension, right? Now your file is saved. Now you need to run that code. So in this Python programming language, you no need to perform compilation. You just need to run your code directly. Click on run module. Now can you see your output is displayed here. The basic operations, right? So if you want to create another code, like if you want to write another logic, again you need to go to a file, create a new file and save it and run it. Okay, in the similar way, see if I want to create some 10, let us suppose I want to write 10 programs. Okay, if you are using this IDLE, and this IDLE is similar to a PyCharm and different IDEs. Okay, if you want to write 10 programs, you need to create 10 files. Yes or no? And when you run this, your output will be displayed in some another window, not in the same window. Okay, that is the main drawback. Okay, so if you go to this Jupyter notebook, I'm writing my logic here. Okay, and once you're done with that logic, click on run. You'll get output immediate to that cell. Okay, see now if you want to write 10 programs, you can write all 10 programs in a single file. How? By adding different cells. See, this is one cell. In this cell, you can write your logic. And this is another cell. By adding cells, you can write your code inside that cell. Clear? And your output will be displayed immediate to that cell. And if I start writing this, okay, you can see the spelling. Like when I'm writing this PRI, whatever the properties which are there with that spelling will be displayed here, and you can directly select that and you can write your logic. This is auto filling option is there in this Jupyter notebook. And the basic like what do you mean packages, most of the packages are already installed in this Jupyter notebook. That is the main reason we're going with this Jupyter notebook, and it is available with Anaconda Navigator. Okay. So when you go to this Anaconda Navigator, you can install Jupyter Notebook. If you want to compare this with other IDEs, you can compare. Whichever you feel comfortable, you can go with that. But most of the times, I'll be using this Jupyter Notebook only. Okay. So that is the introduction to Python programming. Okay. See, I hope whatever the things we discussed in this session are clear for you. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you use Visual Studio, no, that console will be different. From IDE to IDE, the console will be different. If you already installed Visual Studio, just try to work with this Jupyter Notebook once. You just compare that Visual Studio with Jupyter Notebook. Whichever you feel comfortable, you can go with that. I'm not forcing you to use this Jupyter Notebook. I'm just suggesting you to use this notebook. Okay. Any other questions? Swaminathan, do you have any questions?